All right, your wish is my command.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time. I've been doing a series of videos that look at the original series of the Twilight Zone from 1959 to 1964. It's 156 episodes, and I'm looking at every single one of them over a period of however long it takes to do these videos. But it's going to be 26 videos, and I'm now on part 7. So this is the 7th video. I'm doing them in batches of 6. So we're into the 2nd season. So the last video ended the 1st season. Now we're into the 2nd season. The 2nd season is interesting for 2 things. One, the really famous narration with the famous music. The that music occurs for the first time. So that's a really big thing because it's very familiar. It's awesome. It's great to see it. So that remains the theme for the rest of the series. And in this series, you get the iconic appearance of Rod Serling doing the opening narration on camera, which hadn't happened up to this point. So it was really, really cool. It was happening now for every episode. So 2 really big changes for the 2nd season. And it's got some great episodes in it. This little batch of 6 has got real extremes. It's got some of the best episodes, but it's also got the first appearance of an episode I didn't like. So it's quite way in because I do tend to like them all. You know, most of them, if you know what I mean. But yeah, there is one coming up that I didn't really like. So yeah, let's crack on. So the first one is called King 9 Will Not Return. So King 9 Will Not Return starts with this opening narration. This is Africa, 1943. War spits out its violence overhead and the sandy graveyard swallows it up. Her name is King 9, B-25, medium bomber, 12th Air Force. On a hot, still morning, she took off from Tunisia to bomb the southern tip of Italy. An errant piece of flak tore a hole in a wing tank, and like a wounded bird, this is where she landed, not to return this day or any other day. So King 9 Will Not Return is another one similar to Where Is Everybody, where it's a man who doesn't know where he is, doesn't really know who he... Well, he does know who he is, but doesn't know where he is, doesn't understand why he's in this desert, and his friends and colleagues aren't there. He's a pilot, but he's in charge of a squadron, and they're not there, and he's freaking out. The whole thing, actually, is this sort of crazed delirium for the whole thing. He's shouting a lot. The performance is quite a stellar performance from Bob Cummings, who plays the main character, and he's really like going for it, and it's quite hysterical, the performance, but it works because of the context of what he's doing. The kind of context of the plot and the twist is different to Where Is Everybody, and you could suggest that the twist kind of means that possibly for the first time you've got this sort of mysterious mix of the real and the unreal in this episode. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's a very eerie atmosphere for the whole thing, and it's very effective. So it has got some similarities to Where Is Everybody, but yeah, it's slightly different. I don't like it as much as Where Is Everybody, and out of these 6, it's one of the weaker ones. But yeah, it's a classic Twilight Zone situation. So that's King 9 Will Not Return. The 2nd episode is The Man in the Bottle. Okay, so Man in the Bottle starts with this opening narration. Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Castle, gentle and infinitely patient people, whose lives have been a hope chest with a rusty lock and a lost set of keys. But in just a moment, that hope chest will be opened, and an improbable phantom will try to bedeck the darkness of these 2 people's failure-laden lives with the gold and precious stones of fulfillment. Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Castle, standing on the outskirts and about to enter the Twilight Zone. So The Man in the Bottle, another one written by Rod Serling. So the first one was written by Rod Serling. I didn't say that. So that's written by Rod Serling. This one's written by Rod Serling. And The Man in the Bottle is basically a genie story. So some of the aspects of the genie story is quite predictable because it's so familiar and so many people have done it and there's so many versions of it. But I really like this episode. I thought it was a really, really good episode. And the main part was done brilliantly. And you really do feel a lot of sympathy for him. Basically, he owns an antique shop, and someone comes in, this old woman comes in, and he's really struggling. He doesn't really want to buy any more stuff for the shop because he's really struggling. Him and his wife had a scene where they were talking about how little money they had. And this old woman comes in, and she wants to sell him a bottle. And he kind of gives in because she gets really upset. So he has this bottle, and then it accidentally gets opened, and then this genie comes out, gives him 4 wishes. And you can probably imagine that those 4 wishes don't go very well, but it's really good. And the last part of the episode, it got a real dark twist to it. So I thought, oh wow, they've gone there. But having said that, Rod Serling does refer to war situations a lot in the Twilight Zone. He refers to despotic leaders and totalitarianism a lot. So it's a very Rod Serling-esque thing to do in the episode. So the fact that he wrote it means it's not that shocking that they did what they did in the end of the episode. But then there's a really nice epilogue at the end after that bit. And it's just a really, really good, strong episode about a genie. And the genie character, I think, is really well done as well. So yeah, I just think it's a really successful episode. So Man in the Bottle is a really good one. And then the third episode is, it's got a fantastic title, Nervous Man in a $4 Room. Nervous Man in a $4 Room starts with this opening narration. This is Mr. Jackie Rhodes, aged 34, and where some men leave a mark on their lives as a record of their fragmentary existence on Earth, this man leaves a blot, a dirty, discoloured blemish to document a cheap and an undistinguished sojourn amongst his betters. What you're about to watch in this room is a strange and mortal combat between a man and himself. For in just a moment, Mr. Jackie Rhodes, whose life has been given over to fighting adversaries, will find his most formidable opponent in a cheap hotel room that is in reality the outskirts of the Twilight Zone. Okay, so Nervous Man in a $4 Room, written by Rod Serling again. It's a really effective, brilliant episode with a very tight script, so it kind of jumps in straight away. You're in there immediately. There's not a lot of setting up. There's one man in a hotel room, absolutely hysterical with panic because he knows he's got to do this job for this criminal who he's been working with for a while, called George, and he's waiting for this call. He's waiting for this job, but he just doesn't want to do it anymore. He doesn't want to be in the criminal world anymore. And he's just become this sort of, coward essentially, because how it transpires by the end of it, you'll see that he didn't used to be this kind of character. But in the end, a lot of the episode is him talking to the mirror, and the mirror is the alter ego, the kind of like successful version of him, the old version of him before he collapsed and had this sort of breakdown. And it's just really cool the way that the Twilight Zone affects this character that's at the end of his tether. And it's just got a brilliant ending, really good performance again at the centre of it, and a man who has to play 2 different versions of himself, so very difficult to do, I think. And it's got some awesome music by Jerry Goldsmith. So Jerry Goldsmith and Bernard Herrmann, 2 of the greatest composers ever lived, are all over this series in general. But yeah, this has got some really cool music by Jerry Goldsmith in this episode. Okay, so the next one is another Rod Serling episode. It's called A Thing About Machines. Okay, so A Thing About Machines begins with this opening narration. This is Mr. Bartlett Finchley, aged 48, a practicing sophisticate who writes very special and very precious things for gourmet magazines and the like. He's a bachelor and a recluse with few friends, only devotees and adherents to the cause of tart sophistry. He has no interest save whatever current annoyances he can put his mind to. He has no purpose to his life except the formulation of day-to-day opportunities to vent his wrath on mechanical contrivances of an age he bores. In short, Mr. Bartlett Finchley is a malcontent, born either too late or too early in the century, and who in just a moment will enter a realm where muscles and the will to fight back are not limited to human beings. Next stop for Mr. Bartlett Finchley, the Twilight Zone. Okay, the thing about machines, it's a really unique episode. I mean, they get these episodes now and again that are quite memorable because they're so different. And this one is about a man, a very dislikable man, one of the most dislikable characters in the Twilight Zone, I think. There's a few that crop up, but this one is a prize dickhead, and he's a very successful, obnoxious man who just attacks everybody, thinks he's better than everybody else, just barks at everybody. Every time he sees anyone he sees, he's just going blah, 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 blah at them. And he's got this thing about machines, like he thinks they are just deliberately breaking, and but you notice straight away that he's smashing them up without a lot of cause, and he thinks the machines are out to get him. And as the episode continues, you see that the machines kind of wreak revenge on this character. So yeah, he's got a ridiculous temper, like you know, a severe temper, and he's taken it out on these machines, and the machines kind of get their revenge. And yeah, I think it's a really good episode. But you would probably not enjoy the episode if you can't stand this main character, who is really, really obnoxious. I would say also what's interesting is that a lot of episodes of the Twilight Zone are usually 2 or 3 people in a room talking, and this has got quite a lot of action in it. There's a massive sequence where he's being chased by a car down the road, his own car, without a driver. But that's kind of interesting because it's got a different kind of feel to it. There's a different energy in the episode, and I think that's pretty good. So yeah, the thing about machines I thought was a good episode. Another Rod Serling one. Most of these episodes are written by Rod Serling for this little batch. So the next episode is The Howling Man. And The Howling Man begins with this opening narration. The prostrate form of Dr. David Ellington, scholar, seeker of truth, and regrettably finder of truth. A man who will shortly arise from exhaustion to confront a problem that has tormented mankind since the beginning of time. A man who knocked on a door seeking sanctuary and found instead the outer edges of the Twilight Zone. Okay, so The Howling Man is about a man who is caught during a walking holiday in Eastern Europe. He is caught in this horrific storm, and he's sort of banging on this door of this place saying, please let me in, please let me in. And it's like rain everywhere. It's like right at night, there's like thunder and lightning. And these people inside reluctantly let him in. And these guys are part of this sort of cultish, they're like cultish monks. And the main one, played by John Carradine, he kind of looks like Moses. It's got that sort of look about him. And these monks don't really want to keep this man there. They keep saying, no, you got to leave, you got to leave. And eventually he's like, why do you keep saying, I've got to leave? Why can't you just let me stay during the storm? And as it transpires, they are very nervous and wary and paranoid about the fact that they have got imprisoned in their place, which is like a castle kind of thing. They've got imprisoned the devil. So they're very worried about the fact that there's this visitor come in, and they don't want this visitor to interfere with all that. So they've got the devil imprisoned. And what happens is, obviously, this guy does interfere with the fact they got the devil imprisoned, and it kind of moves on from there. And this, as I said at the beginning, there is one episode I didn't like in this little batch. It's the first one out of the whole series so far that I didn't like. There are a few others later on, but this one, it just annoyed me the way that it was presented. So I think it's a really good story, written by Charles Beaumont, and he's written some of the best ones. I like the story. I like the premise. I just didn't like the presentation. The acting is a lot more melodramatic than what you'd get for the Twilight Zone. It's really similar to kind of like 1930s Universal horror films and that kind of thing, you know, very overly theatrical, which I think they're doing that because of the nature of the plot, but it didn't work for me. It got my nerves, and I found some of the dialogue a little bit like that as well, because it kind of went with the acting style. So yeah, I found that one a disappointing episode, The Howling Man. But there we are. It's been quite a lot of episodes before I got to one I didn't like. But I do like the premise. I just didn't like the way it was done. Okay. And then that is followed by one of the most famous episodes, one of the best episodes, one of the most effective episodes. It's just an incredible thing. And that is Eye of the Beholder. Okay, and this iconic episode starts with this opening narration. Suspended in time and space for a moment, your introduction to Miss Janet Tyler, who lives in a very private world of darkness, a universe whose dimensions are the size, thickness, length of a swath of bandages that cover her face. In a moment, we'll go back into this room, and also in a moment we'll look under those bandages, keeping in mind, of course, that we're not to be surprised at what we see, because this isn't just a hospital, and patient 307 is not just a woman. This happens to be the Twilight Zone, and Miss Tyler, with you, is about to enter it. Okay, Eye of the Beholder is a really clever episode, which is all about direction and, well, misdirection, actually. It's all about misdirection. But a lot of it is about the directing and the camera angles and what they chose to do to hide the big reveal that they do at the end of the episode. The big reveal is the huge thing about this episode. You know, it is the ultimate definition of a twist episode. It's absolutely amazing. And this one and Time Enough at Last and a few episodes like that are why the Twilight Zone ended up with a reputation of having these great twists. And it's got a fantastic premise where this character, this woman who spends almost all of the episode in bandages, is very scared of having the bandages removed, but she's wanted this series of operations to improve her appearance because she's so horrifically ugly that she's been attacked in the street and all that kind of thing. So she's in there to have some corrective surgery. And all the way through this episode, you don't see all of the bodies or faces of the nurses and doctors in the hospital and anyone that's not her. So you don't see anyone fully in this episode, and that is deliberate. Even when you get these screens up around the hospital where you get the sort of supreme leader in this, what appears to be some kind of authoritarian state. They talk about the state in the episode, so that suggests some kind of dystopian thing. But even when the supreme leader's on screen, you can't really see them properly, not until the end. And the end is a big reveal. And the makeup by William Tuttle, you know, the Twilight Zone makeup guy, is phenomenal. It's iconic. It's very famous. So this image, if you've seen it's been used for you have fancy dress costumes with it on. You know, it's very famous, and in American culture especially. So yeah, the makeup is amazing. But it is a fantastic episode. It's very, very clever. It's really effective. It's very powerful. And ultimately, you know, it's Rod Serling doing another message about conformity and tolerance and difference. You know, he does that quite a few times. And he's so angry about the way people treat each other that's what comes through in these episodes. So a really successful episode. Really, really successful episode. That finishes my first batch of the second season. And it's interesting because by the time you get to this point in the Twilight Zone story, the first season was really successful. And there was like fan clubs, there was a board game, there was a record album that came out, there was Rod Serling won an Emmy, there was loads of different kind of memorabilia that came out from the show. Loads of people were buying, like there was comics that came out at the time as well that bounced off the Twilight Zone. There was a novelization of the stories as well that Rod Serling produced, like 2 of those. And it was all thanks to the success of the first series. So season 2 was starting with a, if you like, a cultural applause. And they did say as well that it was easier to find actors because if they asked the actors to appear on the Twilight Zone, they often did it for half the money to do other jobs. And they just loved the fact they were getting on the Twilight Zone. So they had got a lot of more freedom about who they'd pick to do the characters in the show, which is really interesting, isn't it? So yeah, we're into the 2nd season, and it's you know, there's some great episodes in this, and a couple of weaker ones as well. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Stay curious. Bye.
Picture of what it's like to